Alex, we are back.
Jason, I'm so glad we're back. I feel like we've been gone forever.
Well, it was we did the ho ho ho.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that not referring to anything that we do, like our actions.
No, nothing illegal.
But we had Christmas.
Yep.
I think we did some before, a little bit before Christmas.
Yeah, we did. And then we also had New Year's.
Then we had New Year's, and then you were partying it up on New Year's.
Yeah.
Didn't you go to a festival?
Yeah, I did.
Or a concert or
yeah,
something?
It was really nice. I saw Bilal.
Yes. Yeah.
He's a cool dude. He's the only like nonprofit DJ in the world. So all of his proceeds that he makes goes towards, whatever his dedicated donation is for the year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Orphanages, whatever it might be, food shortages.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
All profits.
What did it, yeah, but he's like more like progressive trance, stuff like that, I think.
That's correct, yeah.
And then they have a new guy coming, same place I saw the other day. Jaws.
I don't know who
Which
that,
I talked to our interns, and they were saying that he's like bass drops.
Really?
Yeah, so it's like his are always, if you go on YouTube, his are always like hardcore parties and people are dancing hard.
Oh, that sounds
fun.
Yeah,
it sounds fun. Yeah,
I can already I'm sensing myself like sweating right now from dancing so much. I think I have a bead of sweat.
Get out. So do you like? So you just go out there, huh?
Oh, I'm on the floor. I'm usually like the first or second person on the floor.
Yeah, that's usually how I do it. I just go out there and have fun, and then
no one gives a shit. We're all there for the
same
reason.
Yeah, exactly.
And
everybody else is on ecstasy all around me, so they don't even know who I am.
They'll never even remember my face.
I've never even took it. I don't even know.
So much
I'm like the only guy at an EDM concert.
So much of them, I'm a fucking lizard. They'll never know. They don't even know my face is. Right now, they're seeing like Nature Woman or something.
They just see this super tall guy.
Yeah. Like, whoa. Why is that dude so tall?
Do you ever hear girls like, put me on your shoulders?
Oh, yeah, I get a better view from where you are.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
taller than the stage.
Yeah. I want to look at the back of your head.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. When I go to the shows, I just look over everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Not that they're less than me.
Right. No, we're going to talk about that today.
I was just graced with the fact of being tall.
Yes.
Nice,
what are you?
Good roll of
6
dice.
for people that are just listening, not watching the video. Because we're on YouTube under Higher Density Living. And we have Next Level now. It's 2020.
Yeah.
Everybody's stepping shit up.
That's what we're doing.
So we're green screening now.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we have.
That's a lot of green.
Yeah, and then behind us can be anything.
I'll just put a picture of me.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you standing at a concert.
Yeah, we'll just show
dancing.
everybody.
No, we'll just have a loop.
We'll have a loop of me dancing.
What's the Instagram where they have the what is that called? A boomerang.
Yeah, we'll do a boomerang. Just me dancing.
Oh, that would be funny. Okay, enough of our 3 minutes of ranting.
Yeah, what a waste.
About EDM concerts. Yeah, people already tuned us out.
Yeah, just killing their brain cells.
Let's talk about New Thought authors. So like it was interesting in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we had this New Thought movement that hit the United States pretty hardcore. And I haven't delved into it, and maybe we want to do a show just on New Thought, the movement itself, because there were so many people that started writing books and authors that were coming out, and they were like challenging. I mean, even back then, late 1800s, early 1900s, they're like challenging status quo. They're challenging
how we
religion,
think, how we perceive things.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of religion came out of that. Like even on Christianity, because I'm in that arena. I was in that arena pretty heavily, like the charismatic movement and non-denominational churches and all that. The faith movement and these different divisions held the core of fundamentalism with the Bible, but then they took New Thought. Whether they realize it or not, they took like a new thought, developing the Holy Spirit and allowing, like, have you ever seen somebody speak in tongues?
Yeah. I actually, fuck. I can't believe you just brought that up. So I recorded my dream, right?
Right.
And Harry Potter, how they speak parcel tongue?
Yes.
Like, I was speaking in parcel tongue, like I was like snake language.
Really? So
in
it's
my
like
dream.
Reptilian language? Or?
Yeah. Listen,
I wonder where you
really
were actually speaking.
I don't know. It was just
but I mean, you've seen that. Like, have you ever seen like a Pentecostal church or?
Sure.
And then they're standing up there and yeah.
And there's like a little bit of foam coming out of the side of the mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so a lot of that stemmed from New Thought movement that was coming in. And one of the writers, which I read a lot of their work, but one of the writers was Ernest Holmes.
Cool dude.
Yeah, and he wrote a book that we're going to talk about today, The Science of the Mind. He was born January 1887. So this is an old dude.
What if you... I I shit you not, dude. If this guy was born January 22nd, 1887, I'm going to like lose my...
January 21st.
No way.
Yeah.
The day... So he was yesterday?
Yeah.
Give me this. That's nuts. You can't make that up.
Yeah, January 21st, 1887. And he died April 7th, 1960. His wife died in 1957, and then he died in 1960.
Oh, nice long
so
life.
he lived a long life. He was an American New Thought writer, teacher, and leader. He was the founder of a spiritual movement known as religious science.
I like that. Because he's, you know, we talk about this. It's taking that bridge of, you know, physics, right? And what we know about like quantum mechanics and shit like that, and also applying it to what we understand about spiritualism, how we experience life.
Right.
And pairing those or marrying those two things together brings about that new thought. Or in my mind, you know, essentially...
No pun intended for New Thought movement.
New Thought movement. It's almost like... it's recycling how we should have been in the first place.
Right.
It was there, and then we lost it, and now we're trying to bring it back. Because the context of the church was to define so much of the perspective of how we live in America and how we operate and how we interact with one another and how we feel about spirituality. You know, the church has had a kind of a chokehold on that for a long time.
Well, and also they're antagonists towards science.
Yeah.
I mean, and then almost creating it like an enemy back in the day.
Correct. And I think it's funny to take like that thing that people perceive as the enemy and bring it intimately together with something that they believe so deeply in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you had pastors that were not allowed to even speak because they believed in Darwinism.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, and why would you not embrace science to understand? And that's what he was into. A question I have for you is these metaphysical teachers, and, you know, people say that they're metaphysical. To you, what does that mean? Like if you were going to say you were a metaphysical teacher, what would you say?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought about this the other day. And again, this is another synchronistic thing. Like when you talk about metaphysical, people think like that is not like reality.
Yes. Yes.
You know, some people put it in the cuckoo bucket, or it doesn't have a scientific backing,
or it's like part of the self-help.
It's part of the self-help stuff.
Those books.
Yeah. But in reality, or in truth, when you really begin to look at it, and the data and the science that sits in metaphysics, the unseen world, is actually the determinant for everything that happens in the seen world.
Yes.
You know? Because quantum mechanics, or electrons, or quarks, all of these different things that we cannot see are the defining foundational pieces of what it means to be a human, to live in this universe, to live in this existence. So when I look at a metaphysical teacher, they're not metaphysical teachers. They're teachers.
Right.
They're true teachers. They're ones that are focusing on the infinite thing, the thing that continues on forever. They're trying to teach these everlasting principles. Even through, if it's a different frame of reference or a different flavor, they all go around the same points and paradoxes, right, and spiritual lessons. So I wouldn't say that the metaphysical, or, that they are the kooks. If anything, they're the ones that are closer to the truth than the people that choose to ignore it. Right. Or the people that choose to, victimize it, or say that it is the enemy, right? Or say that, it's the curator of all these issues, or creates the ill in the thought of our own religion. It weakens who we are as a group by having these other spiritual thinkers in there, right? These more free thinkers, these people that choose to blend systems.
But it's so funny how people will find one thing.
I'm so fucking
fired and then
up.
just
I'm sorry.
You have a Sierra Nevada torpedo. But you've only had a couple sips from it. So.
Yeah, I'm torpedoing this podcast.
We're limiting ourselves to one beer.
Yeah. No, but please continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you'll take like a teacher, and they're on the fringe, and they have one thing that somebody will disagree with them on, or something happens or whatever, and then you discredit all their work.
Because of one fringe disagreement?
Yeah, and I hate that, because no one's going to be 100% perfect or 100% right. No one is.
But that's the weight that they carry. Because at that point, they're like, that's the fault. That's what we're going to focus on, the 0.0001% of that time that gentleman says something that you don't actually believe in. Something that may be just a little bit further in the theory that's hard to internalize. You're going to focus on that because you don't agree with it, and say that everything else that they've studied that actually has that backing, that truth, that logical explanation to it, that reasoning to it, doesn't have any value anymore.
I think it's more than that, though, and this is something that we believe at Higher Density Living, especially when we talk about the law of one, is when you put yourself as guru or teacher and then student, and there's a higher class. So the student is always looking to they're looking up to the guru, but then at the same time, there's this other part of them that is looking to discredit the guru, because they're secretly wanting to be. And I forgot. I don't know if it's Freudian, but it's like that. You look at your boss and you secretly want to be him, and you have envy and jealousy towards him.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you have respect. But when you look at the law of one, and you see that whether it's teacher, student, and we're learning and teaching from each other, and we're equal, it eliminates that.
It eliminates
How can you
that.
have jealousy then?
You can't. And then like we like to talk about, the hierarchy disappears at that point, right? So when you look at the metaphysical, a true metaphysical teacher, there is no hierarchy. It's the eradication of such a thing like that, right?
It's just a person that has dedicated themselves to learning something specific.
Correct.
Whether they write a book or whatever, that doesn't make them less or better than.
No, it does not. And if they make a mistake, let them make that mistake. But do not consider that the foundational charge for discrediting that person.
Right.
Because even as a teacher, even as a person that does have at this point more knowledge or more wisdom, the application of knowledge, just because they screwed up once, that is, they're learning too at that point. They're just as much the student as they are the teacher.
Right.
And you, as being that student of that guru or whoever that person might be, you need to recognize that. Because having that respect for them means you have a deeper respect for yourself and the dynamic that they're trying to share with you, because you don't find the reciprocation in that.
Right.
If anything, you're just sucking their energy, and then you're trying to bury what they are trying to create through their thought, through their co-creational efforts of consciousness.
Well, Paul Chek, I like what he said. I mean, he's a wild guy.
You wild guy.
But he said...
Well-shaved head, by the way.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, he said he's a teacher, but by being that teacher, there's a responsibility, and in reality, he's a student because he's learning more than he's teaching.
Yes.
And that's so true. I mean, if you take a good teacher, they're spending 80% of their time learning and 20% teaching. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's what's nice about what we're doing, and even
the polarity.
Yeah, the polarity, right? That push and pull between both of us, that balance, that equilibrium that you and I find. I learned so much just from our dialogues of sharing with one another.
Right, exactly.
Even if I'm teaching you, I learned so much from you, even the way you receive it.
Right.
How you understand or internalize the thought and then regurgitate it back to me to be like, well, this is how I get it.
Yes.
Interesting.
Right.
Because now, through my teaching,
right,
I begin to continually learn. So if anything, it's always asymmetrical. I'm always learning way more than what I'm teaching, even though it may seem like I'm always giving information, right?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. And we're going to get into this, but I want people to, when we talk about someone, an author, a book, we went into religion, whether we're talking about Buddha or Jesus or the Quran, whatever we may get into, because we're going to get in, that's going to be a heavy duty one.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, exactly. I want to get into these people, but I don't want us to elevate them. I want us to be where they would want to be.
Right.
So any great teacher knows where they're at.
They're just another infinitely spiritual being on a journey just as much as we are.
Yes.
And they've only chose to dictate their journey in prose on paper.
Yeah, because I see so many people, and I fell into this. It's like, oh, I like this person. They're really cool. Let me listen to everything I can on them. Let me buy all their books. And then I'm putting them at a hierarchy. You know what I'm saying? Instead of looking them at an equal equilibrium.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I have read, a lot of books, and the spiritual insight you begin to see, and whether or not if it's channeled material from what, people coin as extraterrestrials or enlightened evolutionary beings, it is difficult in terms of the mindset from a frame of reference to be like, wow, they are evolved past my point. They've learned so many of these lessons for millions of years before I have. It's hard not to put them on that pedestal.
Right, exactly.
It's hard to look at them in an equal, but the thing is, they are truly equal. They're not, greater than or less than just because they have a longer time span of knowledge. That's a construct that you and I have. Mm-hmm. So if we go on LinkedIn, right? This guy's like, I've had 40 years of experience, working at IBM at this specific thing.
Right.
Well, how is it to say that makes him better than anybody else because he sat there for 40 years in front of a computer, or went to 40 years of boards meeting when people just say,
and then when you look at time and really what that is, and we've talked about that.
Again, it's another
construct.
It's
an illusion, yeah.
So if we take an illusory principle and assume that the length of time, which isn't even real, is determinant of the quality and the amount of knowledge someone has, it's not typically true, because what I can internalize and self-realize within 5 minutes of talking to a person who might be more involved with me could cover 40 years of learning where someone never even got to that point to learn that lesson.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it becomes very difficult in perspective not to look at it from a time standpoint, but the fact of that it's a shared journey we all go through.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of where they are, we still continue to go through these thematic things to move ourselves through these cycles to evolve.
And what I like about, and he even said that, and this is why when I see something like this in the book, he said, none of these things that I'm going to share with you are something that I've came up with.
Correct.
You know, I mean, he mainly focused on like Greek philosophers and you know, did a little bit of Eastern religion and stuff like that. But he talked about, you know, the sacred writings that he reviewed and stuff like that. He was just trying to put them in more of a science-based, you know, late 1800s, early 1900 type translation, if you want to say it that way.
We discussed this. Jesus talked in parables.
Yes.
You know,
Farming,
Joshua
very
ben
simple.
Joseph, right?
Right.
Whatever you want to call him,
Right.
doesn't matter. He spoke in parables because that, at that time, was what people could understand and resonate with,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this gentleman who's doing the science of the mind is speaking like, listen, I had to take these older scripts, these parables, these stories, and put them into a frame of reference for scientific thought when it's really expanding at this time in the early 1900s,
Yes.
right? And put it in a frame of reference where people were like, wow, he's trying to find that bridge between what people are used to and what they're not used to and marry them together.
So electricity, you had that coming on the scene. You had the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at, you know, like early 1900s, we're seeing a huge shift for science.
You bet we
I mean, I think everybody was looking, and we talked about this with the architecture, our previous podcast.
Yeah, shape power.
Yeah, it was man, the ability for humanism. I would say that would be the right word, that we would, you know, everything was power, you know, accomplishment, industry.
Volume.
Yes.
Pace.
Yeah, exactly.
You look at, you know, Ford with the
Mhm.
assembly line. How much can we do? How quickly? Utilizing the resources
Efficiency,
to get the
yeah.
largest amount of gain.
Right.
You know, and like, what is that?
And so these metaphysical teachers came on the scene to kind of be like, hey, you know, great. I'm glad we're using science. And he talks about that in the introduction of the book. He talks about that we're just in the beginning stages of understanding science.
Yeah.
And that science will prove the spiritual aspect of things.
It will.
And that's where we're at with higher density living.
And we're seeing that now.
Yes.
You know, quantum mechanics was designed in the late 30s, you know, with the Austrians, New Zealand, and a couple of German physicists that came over here to the U.S., specifically
Right.
here in New Mexico. And they were focusing on this world that could not be seen. And only until now is like the words of quantum mechanics and string theory and M theory and all these different things, are they becoming a little bit more mainstream? And this guy was trying to preach it in the early 1900s to make that bridge. And only now are we starting to take science and move it into that realm.
And people have to understand the reality at their time where they were at, and they were used as that person that laid that foundation for that bridge.
Yes.
So, and somebody like this, you know, with reading his book, I believe he was one of those. I kind of want to get into interrupt me here, but the science of the mind, this is Wikipedia, the science of the mind on the theory that there is one infinite mind, which of necessity includes all that is, whether it be the intelligence of man, the life in the animal, or the invisible presence, which is God. And he uses God, and we're going to talk about this as like, he calls it universal spirit.
Yeah, it's just a term of, you
Right.
know, like we say infinite energy, right? Creator, source
Right.
energy.
And I think people get confused with that, and they get hung up in theology, because you have to understand, if it was when Jesus talked about God, it was, like you said, parables, very basic, farming, fishing. And so he made references to that. Now we're in the industrial age. We're dealing with somebody that's, everybody goes to church, like literally.
Everyone.
If you're in New York City, you know, if you're if you're Scottish, you're going to go to a certain type of church. If you're yeah, exactly.
Trying to go to the Thunderdome?
Yes. No, but I'm just saying, all the different, if you're Italian, you're going to go to the Catholic church, and you're going to have Italian priests that are there. Yeah. So at Sunday, that's what you did. You couldn't drink alcohol on Sundays. I mean, so you need to understand the culture in where he's at. So he uses a lot of Christianese terminology,
Sure.
but he does a good job in explaining it. You know, like when he talks about universal spirit, he says that universal spirit, and he uses the word God, but he makes it clear, like when I say God, I'm saying, and this is what he says, is the source of all things, and that this one power moves through us as love, as creativity, and that we can actively participate, which it creates happier, fulfilling, peaceful, and joyous lives.
Yeah, so if God is, right?
Right.
So it's source, energy, that
Right.
it's pervasive in everything.
Right.
It is love.
Yes.
So whether you call it God or something else, they're all describing the same thing, different formats.
Yes, exactly.
And he talks about the all universal, pervasive mind that we all share. Well, it's fantastic that he's not a hypocrite in the fact that he's talking about we all share one mind and he has no original thought. They're just borrowed thoughts.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So if somebody else had a thought somewhere, well, yes, I'm going to pick up on that. I'm going to pull that down. The science of the mind says that I can actually tap into that ether. Right. Or as the Vedic script would say, that there was this jeweled web that sat over the entire earth. And we could all share and pluck from this web of consciousness that actually
and
happened.
and people would understand it at that time, a jeweled web. They
Yeah.
would get that. Where he's taking making it almost like a science paper would be with, the IE content, the outline, the ABC point one, the little I with the ...
That's hot. That's hot at that time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
People were like, ooh, like I got to get my hands on that. Right.
So this is really cool. He says, so the presence, which is God, in it we learn to have a spiritual sense of things. This spiritual sense of things is what is meant by the consciousness of Christ. To be able to discern the spiritual idea back of its physical symbol is to use the mind that Jesus used. The science of the mind is intensely practical because it teaches us how to use the mind principle for definite purposes, such as helping those who are sick, impoverished, or unhappy. Each one of us should learn to become a practitioner of this science, a demonstrator of its principle, a conscious user of its power. And this is what he talks about power. Power already exists.
That's correct.
But the existence of power is of no particular value to us until we use it.
So it's stop,
dude. There's you're gonna get some gold nuggets on this.
Stop for a second, okay?
This is great shiz.
On previous episodes, you and I talked about everybody has the power within themselves, right? But it's a function of choice or perspective that how we see reality that we give that power up,
right?
Saying that we don't have that free will, we don't have that ability of choice, okay? But the thing is, if we all have this power, it's choosing what you want to do with it. You can choose to give it up. Go ahead, by all means.
Right.
Learn that lesson that way. Figure out that you never had to give it up in the first place. But if you do have that power, what you do with it is truly going to define the good, the evolutionary principles of the mind, the spirit, right? Becoming one with the universe.
But if you actually believed and even had, Jesus talked about this, is if you had the faith of a mustard seed, which that's the smallest seed that you can have, a mustard seed from a mustard tree.
Very robust plant.
He said, if you had the faith of a mustard seed, which is a very small seed, he said you could actually, if you could tap into that much faith, then you could move mountains, like physically move mountains.
Sure.
But what he was saying there is that same thing. If you understood a small percentage of the power that you had in you, you could be a creator.
Think about it, because it's small. But something small requires an immense amount of focus.
Right.
I need to focus on just this one thing. That means it requires all of your attention to really zone into that point. And if we get so many people focusing on something so finite, and if you look at our previous episode with the amount of vertices you put in a shape increases the electromagnetic field that it generates, well, all those people are those thinking vertices, thinking of that mustard seed, right? And that's what you're getting at. And that's when great change happens.
Right.
When everybody focuses on the internal faith, that internal belief that they have, that power that they have. And having all that power, you want to do good with it. I finished a book a couple weeks ago on Alexander the Great. And one of his quotes was, and he was talking about money, right? So money inherently in itself isn't worth anything. But when you use it to actually achieve these fantastic, lofty goals for the evolution of everyone, then money actually has purpose. But in itself, it's a purposeless thing. But in the context of how it is used. So if you consider money as being power, right? Giving you that power to do something, it's the context of how it's being used to benefit everybody else. For the development of everyone, not to hurt, not to hinder, but to grow, to sow, to water, right? To help it evolutionary be what it needs to be. And one of his quotes that he said that he had learned from his teacher, Aristotle, was that, what is it if I own everything in life but accomplish nothing? And if you really internalize that for a moment with the philosophy of the inherent value of money, the materialistic ideas at the time, and even how we carry that forward now, that yeah, we can have all that power, we can have all that money, but if we don't focus on that power and its usage, if we don't focus on how to use that money, that system of energy for a greater good, then what worth is it really to anything, even to yourself?
Right.
Why continue to pursue that goal if it really comes to accomplish nothing? Why sit on your deathbed if you have no story to tell about all the good you actually created in this world to help others? You know, like what worth is it in life? Because, and then do you really learn? It's quite stagnant, because then your goal is just to accumulate more, you know, rather than to cure and to heal and to learn more.
And that was his whole premise of the book, is to, so those people that were sick, impoverished, or unhappy,
Yeah.
that's who he wrote the book for, because he's like, you're in those states because of your thought process.
Yeah.
And he gets into it a little bit more, but I mean, obviously your brain is an indication of what you think is going to, you have that ability to display that power that's in you.
Right.
I mean, because you can either make it a conduit, you know, and it be a, what's those big things? I used to collect them when I was a kid. They're glass, and they'd be by the railroad yards, and they'd be up on the light poles.
The tubes. Yeah, they're called tubes.
Insulators or tubes or whatever. Yeah, they were porcelain, and they had glass ones. And
when I was in insurance, when I used to sell insurance, I'd have to ask people, I'm like, do you have tube wiring in your house? And people are like, what is that? I'm like, I don't even know why I'm still asking this.
Yeah.
It was another conductor for energy,
Yes.
right?
But that's what our brains can be.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I think I look at it as being a resistor.
Like stopping the flow for a minute.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
We're not actually letting it move through us. We're actually preventing it.
And I think for me, like, that's my life, is allowing myself to be a conduit instead of a resistor.
Yeah.
Like, my whole battle has been with my mind is to allow the power just to freely flow through me. And then the older I get, the more I see that over and over again. And instead of sitting there and people call it ego, whatever, sin nature, there's all different wording for it, but it's that resistance to things that are good for you, or that you know is right, are truthful. It's so funny because, you know, that's how we are as humans.
If we are a drop of water, right, in the ocean, why would you fight a wave if it's just millions of drops of water? You're essentially fighting yourself. You're trying to fight nature. You're trying to fight yourself.
But we want that. We want to be an individual. We want
you can't. But that's the thing, Jason.
That's the whole fight.
You can be that drop of water by yourself, but understand, in the sense of scale,
right?
It is a drop of water, but it also is the entire ocean within itself.
Yeah. So
maintain the individuality.
Why do I feel like we need to be a drop of water when all the power is being in the ocean?
You know,
because those universal principles are what control the ocean, what create the waves, what create the moon patterns, that
what defines, you know, gravity. That's exactly right. You know, all of these cycles, those are all predefined things from this creator source energy that put together this universe.
Right. And so then why do we feel as a drop of water that we can fight these universal principles and win? Yeah,
especially when the universal principles are the things that actually defined your makeup.
Right.
For who you are.
Right.
And I don't know if it's...
Well, Amazon can help me with that. I'll just buy more shit.
I can attach myself to more things, you know? DeMello would love this.
That was a great podcast, by the way. I re-listened to it here recently.
Attachment was a good episode.
Oh, yeah. That was a great one.
You know, why do you want to fight it? You know, I think there's a sense of fear for letting go. And by letting go does not mean you give up your identity. It just means you're not willing to fight the forces of nature, but essentially move with them. To become something with it. So there was this long-term study that happened with they took very intense practitioners of meditation.
Right. I'm listening to you. I'm just going to grab something.
Yeah, that's fine. And what they realized through the meditation was that in the deepest parts of the meditation, when they actually moved into that state of balance, that their heart rate and their brainwave patterns would actually sync up with the pulses of solar energy that was moving through and across the earth. So this solar wind, this energy, this pulsation of the universe, right? The solar system around them, they became one in rhythm with that universe. So actually through the deepest points of meditation.
I was listening to like some English dude that was talking to Paul Chek about this.
See, this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So they actually at that moment let go and become one with the universe. They flow with it. They understand that in that state, they become one with the universe at that moment.
That where our brains are one with solar flares.
They're one with solar flares. But
think about that.
If you think about the absolute basis of it, Jason, the solar flare is made of the same material, the same atomic or quantum makeup, if you go even smaller, of who you are. So all you're doing is just meeting it halfway so that you can become in sync and increase the resonance, because when you have two frequency patterns that come together, they can resonate in tandem and double the output, its strength. And you become one, you actually become in sync with everything that's happening around you. But you have to let go. You have to overcome that fear. You have to understand that you have no control in what happens around you. You have control in your choice, yes, by all means. You have control in the outcomes and your free will. But everything else that's happening with the universe, the things that are truly out of your control, you need to move and flow with them rather than fight it. But it doesn't erode your identity of who you are as a person. You still maintain it. You still maintain being that singular drop of water, even if it had food coloring in it.
Right.
But when it comes back into the ocean, that will disperse.
Yes.
And then it will become the ocean at that point, and you move with the waves. But you still always maintain that identity of who you are. You have a personal identity, but also the collective identity of the consciousness and the way we think.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what he gets into. He says, the science is more than mental. It's also spiritual, since we live in a spiritual universe. The science of mind declares the truth about the spiritual universe, and it also declares the truth about false belief. So he gets heavily into that. Considering everything which is opposed to good as an accumulation of human thought, the collective negative suggestion of the race. So he gets like, this statement that I'm fixing to tell you blew my mind. And I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks because I've been reading this book for the last 2 weeks. I shared it with you.
You're in the pulpit right now.
Yeah. No, but I want you to think about the statement I'm fixing to tell you, because I'm going to pause because I want this. This really.
Tell me,
there's
preacher.
religion. Yeah,
Tell me, preacher.
Oh yeah.
I'm already sweating in church. I'm gonna be speaking in tongues in a second if you keep it up.
Yeah, you burn in hell forever and ever.
Oh my God. Oh no.
Fire and brimstone. When the worm dieth not.
One of something.
Worms are going to eat your skin forever.
I don't give a shit. It's cold in this room.
It is very cold in this room.
You burn it up.
I have a jacket on.
Yeah.
You have a t-shirt on.
Yeah, I'm just feeling it.
Listen to this statement. And then I want us to elaborate on this.
I got headphones on.
But I want you to really think about this when I say it.
Okay.
Wrong conditions are resolved into false beliefs. Dude, is that worth the book?
Read no more, ladies and gentlemen.
That's the book. That could have been the book right there. Wrong conditions are resolved. Great word. Wrong conditions are resolved into false beliefs.
Yeah.
Just those few words are so powerful.
So we have to look at conditioning, right? It's a perception or an idea of this elusive reality. And what we do is we take what we're observing through a false lens, and then we put that into a system of belief with no basis behind it. And then we determine that that system of belief then becomes the truth. Because collectively, we are all looking through that lens. Rather than going back to the root, okay, which is the distortion of reality. And we question our perspective. Don't question the belief.
Yes.
Question the perspective, how you look at that belief, how you internalize that belief, how you define that belief. That's what needs to be looked at, because if you don't do that, that distortion, that illusion will transition into that false belief. It will resolve itself. The chaos will find complacency in a false belief. And that false belief then becomes common truth.
Yes, and so that chaos becomes law.
It becomes law.
Yeah.
And it becomes the determinant for how people think they should act.
Whether you're a white privileged family where you're from, or whether you're in Detroit in you know, the inner cities, or whether you're in a trailer park in West Virginia working in the mines.
Yeah.
Wrong conditions are resolved into false beliefs.
Yeah. And so say you're in that condition. So if you're in a wrong condition, are you placing blame? What put me in this mine? Why was I born black?
Mm-hmm.
Why was I born on the East Coast? Right? Why was I born privileged? Is it a wrong condition to look at it and question why? Am I to blame the circumstance and then put the perspective of my life as a determinant for how I looked at the probability of where I am right now? But if we look at a function of reincarnation and a lesson learned, you're exactly where you need to be.
Right.
Because then we start changing the frame of reference, the actual perspective of how we look at that resolution into a false truth. Because then we're like, oh, maybe I needed to be here. Maybe I needed to learn this extremely difficult lesson, even though it seems unfair.
Because I'm not from New York, Italian, and Catholic.
Yeah.
I'm not that.
So what? You don't need to be that right now.
Yes.
So
But in reality, you're not that.
in reality, you're not that. You never have been.
Yes.
Again, it's this illusory perspective which you've resolved into a false truth that is who you are.
Because I am.
I'm an Italian American in New York City. This is my name.
But I'm also trailer park trash in West Virginia.
Says who?
Because I am all.
Yeah. You're everything.
Yes.
You're also the person in the mine.
Yes.
You're also the poor black person, you know,
Yes.
Whatever, you know, impoverished demographic in the United States.
And we've talked about this before, but there's no reason to have, I know financial systems, we went into that and we went into racism and all that, but all that is gone when you understand this.
Yeah. If you understand, again, the perspective, the founding root perspective, if you go back to that point of source, everything else is like the false illusion.
Because I am a collection of.
Of course we are. We all share in this mind, this consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Science has shown that our consciousness actually connect.
Mm-hmm.
You and I share energetic signatures when we're in this flow.
Mm-hmm.
Our two water drops come together to create a bigger water drop. And we're sharing in that bond.
Even though I had somebody got on to me the other day. This is funny. So we'll confess on air. So I was texting them and they were like, "Are you upset?" And I'm like, "No." And then they came over to my place and I was like, "Why were you so upset?" And they're like, "Read your text." And I was like, "What?" And so I gave them my phone and they were reading the text and they were like, "You're real short and like real quick."
Isn't it funny how you hear from their context?
Yes. And so that's what I'm saying. And so then I happened to look at your text. We were on my phone and you were up there too.
Yeah.
And she was reading through those and she's like, "Why are you so mean to him?"
No,
I'm like, and I don't know if you perceive it as that way or not.
I had to stop myself for a moment and I'm like, Jason's not upset.
No.
It's just how he is responding.
No, it's like unless I like a phone call is easier for me. You know, like if I'm not busy, like a phone call is perfect because then I can just talk. Text, I'm always like as less words as possible, which sometimes can't be good.
I had to stop myself.
Yeah, but I mean, but she was like, when I text you, you always seem like you're inconvenienced, which is a great perspective. So it kind of helped me. Yeah.
Thank you for teaching me.
Yes,
it's a teaching moment.
You're really quick. You act like you're really inconvenienced.
Yeah.
And you seem like you're upset. And I was like, you're perceiving those three things. I was like, I'm not feeling any of those. I was just being quick and like, because I have ADD and I'm on to the next thing. You know what I mean? I'm just typing something how I think real fast.
Right.
You know, I don't take the time, my fault, but I don't take the time to think of how to word it properly.
It's not, and the thing is, there's an anticipation.
But I wouldn't have known that insight because there's probably lots of people that think that way.
Well, you sent it to me, and I'm like, he's not pissed. I know he's not pissed. It's just how he's responding, right?
Right.
And the directness of it, I appreciate. But I'm always
you're from the East Coast.
If I'm like talking to my Amanda, there's I can understand the flavor and the emotion through the text message.
Right.
You can feel it, but the dynamic is different between you, and so it'd be wrong of me to take a perspective,
right,
and take that a resolution from a frame of reference to assume that it belongs in that other person too.
So when I hear wrong conditions are resolved into false beliefs,
yes,
that's the same thing.
That's the same exact thing.
You don't know how that person feels or in that moment, and it's words, and you're only perceiving a small percentage of what's actually going on.
Correct.
I've seen people write LOL and be crying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think I did that last night.
But I mean, you don't know. They could be hurting inside. LOL. I watched a video of the singer that killed himself, and he was with his kids like an hour before on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
They were opening presents or something like that. It was one of the major. Oh, I don't want to. I wish I knew who it was.
But again,
it's a '90s grunge band.
But you and I.
But
talked
you
about
would
this.
never. You would watch the video and you'd be like, "This guy's amazing. He's happy with his family." And then an hour later.
But that's your perception, man.
Yes.
This is what we were talking about. Like someone puts up a damn photo of themselves, like working out in the gym, or they're in their Gymshark clothing, and the girl's looking fantastic.
Fantastic.
And Amanda and I can both agree on this. Like, wow, that woman is good looking, in shape, right? But you don't really know how that person feels internally.
Right.
It's your perception of how you perceive the world from the physicality of it, of what you're seeing, that you judge and think or assume that this person is feeling a certain way.
But we don't know their condition.
We don't know the condition.
And their false belief.
Yes. And
because our false beliefs, this is the learn teach thing again. Our false beliefs is judging their false beliefs, and then we're turning around and making division.
Precisely.
That's what's going on in the United States.
Precisely.
Right
yeah. We're essentially dividing ourselves unnecessarily.
My false belief doesn't align with your false belief, so fuck off.
Yeah, I don't even want to be near you.
Yeah, I'm right, I'm left. And it's so funny. I was talking to somebody the other day. Do you know how many right friends and left friends I have?
I'm both sides.
Yeah, same here. But I mean, I have lots of people that are Trump supporters, and I have lots of people that are extremely left, and I like them all equally.
I want to like them all.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for you.
There's
for
good
things
I see. Like, oh, I like that you're fiscally conservative and you like to have guns. And the other one, I'm like that you're concerned about women's rights and
sure.
I mean, I like all of that.
I like the blend of all of the different states of consciousness because they all have so much good, and it's funny.
They all have a truth.
There's a truth in every single piece of it, right?
Yes.
And, I live a large part of my life where it's like I may have 99% of like the puzzle completely finished, but I'm looking for that last piece, that last jigsaw puzzle piece. But I don't know who's going to have that piece.
Right.
So I always have to be open and listen and wait for that nugget to finish this beautiful piece of artwork for how I look at what's going on because I've been collecting them over time.
Yes.
But you always have to have ears open. And I always have to listen and really internalize what someone is saying, what they feel, how they truly think, the way they look at me, that shared relationship, because there's something to be learned there. Even if you don't think a moment is a teaching moment, it always is. Even if you're passing a homeless person on the street, how you felt when you passed them, because I know you thought about it, when you rolled up that window, what emotionally was going on with you? What was the charge or the conscious thought that is driving you to create that natural separation, physically and emotionally, from that person? Something is causing that.
Yes.
There's always a teaching moment.
Yes.
In everything that you do. Like me sitting here talking to you is a teaching moment. I've chosen to spend this time.
Being in traffic and frustrated is a teaching moment.
It's a teaching moment. And how do you move, again, step out of that cycle? And when we're talking about the science of the mind here, depending on the frame of reference at the time and the knowledge and the historical text that he takes, is trying to move people and look at that basis, that original perspective. It's take them away from the false belief, move back through the resolution, step backwards to find out the true, perceptive context and look at the source of what is creating all of this. Because if you look at this shared binding ingredient, like the egg yolk that holds a cake together, right? If you go back and you look at that binding thing that holds it all together and focus on that, everything else is just worthless because it wouldn't be there without this binding agent. So what is truly valuable? What is truly purposeful? What is truly meaningful that we need to focus on? And how do we learn our lessons so that we can actually, back propagate and learn to get back to that point through our analysis to be like, this is what should be focused on. It's almost like a form of how computers and artificial intelligence work. They take the end outcome to go and then look backwards to see if the original inputs were proper to derive the outcome that we were looking for.
Isn't that funny that we've invented that?
We've invented
to do it that way.
Yeah, the process. We've reinvented the same process that we originally needed as the perfect teaching tool to show us what's truly important in this life.
That's awesome. One of So after that statement that he said, wrong conditions are resolved into false beliefs.
You
Listen
give
to
me
this one.
You give me another one. I'm just
And through the use of right ideas, a transformation of thought takes place. We learn to build our ideas upon an affirmative rather than a negative factor. To state the truth and deny or disregard that which in belief is opposed to it is to prove that the principle of the science of the mind is actual.
yeah, and if just affirmative positive reinforcement to be like, oh, yes, that is the cause. Oh, wait a minute. Did stepping backwards and realizing that, looking back and saying, oh, that was the cause, that process works? Moving backwards into the roots of the mind? What if I take another step? What if I take another step? Then this scientific theory, this scientific idea, this construct, if I do this, then this will happen, right? It's almost like this hypothesis. If it continues to work, use that constructive idea of theory to find those affirmatives. Because the more affirmatives you find, the further you work back, the more deductive this process is in the science of the mind, you get down to the root cause. Because when the Pope came to Michelangelo and he asked him, how did you make the statue of David? What did Michelangelo say? He said, I just removed everything that wasn't David. And it leaves you with that core truth, the true piece of artwork, the beauty of who and what you and we really are. Remove it. Remove all those things. Step backwards. Move to the affirmative. Deduct. Because
I think everybody could look at that, though, and say, how can I remove everything that isn't?
Yeah. The easiest start I had for doing something like that was I started looking at the objects that I put in my life around me. Amanda and I are fairly minimal with what we own. I don't like owning a lot of stuff. I don't like accounting for it in my head where it is. Right?
Essentialism.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot about that lately.
I don't, it's nice receiving gifts and things like that, but there's really only so much that I need. We need.
Right.
And when I have too much of it, I expense my time and my thought towards preserving something that wants to erode rather than evolving something that lives on forever, which is myself. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
So one of my first points of deduction that I did was with physical items. And when I started to deduce physical items and their true importance and necessity with my life, I then began to do deductions in my own mind. What do I need to hold on to and what do I need to let go of?
My iPhone.
My iPhone.
I'll take everything else. Can go away. Just keep me my phone.
Bad relationships, fears. I let them all go. But dropping these things off one by one by one by one, I found myself continually refining and seeking the affirmative. I didn't need that.
But you had
Affirmed.
you had a North Star. You had a base point to go to in that which was eternal.
Yes, and that
Because you have this belief that you live forever.
yes, it's in my mind it's proof without truth.
And it's the responsibility of you to seek truth so that the next you can have a stepping stone off of what you have created or found.
That's exactly right. Because Jason, if I internalize all of these lessons, consciousness never forgets. You've done hypnotic regressions.
Right.
You've been walked backwards to remember very detailed points in your early childhood history. Things where people are like, bullshit, that's not possible. But then through the confirmation of speaking with your own parents, they can confirm what you saw through that regression. So what I'm doing is I'm regressing to that evolutionary principle of who I am. And if I never forget these things that I learn, that means the next time I come back or incarnate, say I choose a non-physical form, I will maintain those lessons. I'll be able to use that and apply those lessons, and then I have true wisdom. And then from that, I can create the most amount of good from it. Because if I realize that if I'm a piece of everyone else and they're a part of me, the more I can help others, it's naturally going to help me in the process. It will alleviate those fears, those emotions, those worries, those traumas. They disappear. And if I get rid of them with others, then that energetic signature is no longer shared with them either. We can all evolve past those cycles. And we can learn to be wise with the knowledge that we learn, with the lessons that are there, with those affirmations of truth, to be deductive and lead ourselves to the most pristine and incredible, and I don't want to say godlike, but source-like form, that creative principle of love that flows through all of us to really move us back to that point.
Yeah, and when you look at materialistic things, I remember reading a story of the prospectors that came out west. And it always reminds me when I think of this, is the fool's gold. Do you know what that person felt when they got the fake gold, but they thought it was real?
It must have been so fucking amped up.
Think about that.
Dude,
You sold everything. You moved it all.
Yeah.
You have a mule. You have all your equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, you're chipping rocks, doing whatever, and all of a sudden this thing that looks like gold.
Pyrite comes out.
Yeah, and it's so huge and so beautiful. Think about that.
I am Midas in the flesh.
Do you know how they felt?
Well, they
How amazing that was?
juiced. But what do you
But what
say?
happened when the truth hit?
Why? They were defined, Jason. They
Mm-hmm.
were defined by the fool's gold. They essentially fooled themselves into believing that was their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone stripped them of identity to tell them that's not what that is, then what were they left with? They were demolished inside.
Devastated, yes.
Devastated. They were crippled spiritually. They were no longer what they thought they once were. The hope disappeared because all the hope, right? The choice, the sense of freedom they thought came from
Yes.
this material attachment. But if you deduce that and take that away and never put the focus on that and assume that that was the defining moment, you can become Michelangelo.
Mm-hmm.
You can remove those things that aren't necessary to find that piece of artwork, that beauty in life.
But here's a sad point. When I look at our lives now and I look at those prospectors with the fool's gold, and that person tells them, sorry, but that's not real gold.
Yeah.
You know, and they spend all that time to come off the mountain, 20 days to get back, so have somebody tell them no.
Sounds terrible.
Then they're discouraged, depressed.
I'm discouraged you telling me this.
But what do we do in our consumeristic society? We have so many opportunities to find fool's gold everywhere we go.
Yeah.
So we just live in that cycle.
It's this.
This looks like gold here. Let me go grab this. Oh, and then 20 days later, a year later, 3 years later, oh, it's not good enough. Oh, I'm depressed. Let me go get this. And so it's this constant horrific cycle. But when you think of it that way, like you said, there's only one thing that matters. And that is the ability to progress your eternal self.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's an evolving, everlasting principle. That thing will never rust. Follow that. Right?
Speaking of investment, the dividends are endless.
They're endless dividends, and you can reinvest those dividends.
Yes.
Like
into being selfless.
into
showing
being
love.
selfless. Yeah. And then that becomes, what happens is those repetitive cycles, then that becomes the norm. So something that was felt abnormal and awkward, right? But essentially more truthful to yourself, that focus is now normal. What was against the grain, what seems strange. If I was a metaphysical teacher, they seemed like the kooks, but now that has become the norm. That idea, that frame of reference has changed. Their acceptance in society is something else. More people get Reiki. More people go to a psychic, whether it's a quality psychic or not. More people talk to mediums. More people believe that there's this world, that isn't just doom and gloom when there's death, that I don't have to pay dividends now to guarantee myself a future.
Right.
People are beginning to see beyond
Or
that.
I need to go to a guru, or I need to buy a new car, or I need to, buy this new home.
Yeah. We're taking
External.
they're all external. But we're taking steps, albeit slow, and we just hope that through this process, through this science, this theoretical understanding of the affirmative actions of the mind and our thoughts will deductively lead us to what's important. And if all of us focus on that mustard seed of what's important, if we remove the dirt, if we deductively remove the dirt and find the seed and focus on it, it will sow that growth. It will bring us to the evolutionary point where we can plant our roots.
Right.
And with that quality base of understanding of what's truly important, which is the seed, the soil, and the water, right? Those very basic things are all we truly need to create so much good. And that's where we need to get. And whether you call it the science of the mind, the metaphysics of the mind, the metaphysics of the soul, right? Use mind at the time because we can't talk about spirit itself.
Right.
It's like the mind is just but a tool to refine that thing that we define as the spirit and consciousness. You know, because they're all interlinked. It's mind, body, and spirit. It's the three of them. And that balance, that mustard seed that sits in the center, that's what we got to get towards.
Yes, and that's where we're going to end today. We're at an hour.
I don't think
I don't
think I've ever said mustard seed so many times in my life.
You're going to have to cook with it tonight.
I'm going to.
Yeah, we didn't get into the book. We got into the introduction.
I love getting into just the introduction.
An hour on the introduction.
Yeah.
So it's going to be great. We're going to get into next podcast because I want to be done. We're almost, because we got to keep it under an hour, unfortunately, because these social media with our videos, they're only like an hour or less.
Yeah, nobody wants to listen to this.
But we're going to get into the 10 core concepts of the science of the mind.
Awesome.
And we're going to dive into each of those on the next podcast.
Sweet.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex.
Jason, thank you.